97.9 FM.
Right. It's not raining. Good. What? I've forgotten. Should I?
Just go sit down. Just go sit down.
Yeah. Right. Oh, that way. I don't what? Oh, I don't know. Could you please? It's my list. Should I go? So I don't know quite what. Oh dear. Oh my bread. Chicken cheese.
What?
Chicken cheese?
Sorry.
Oh. Oh. I don't know. People with dementia have experiences like this every day. A little bit of understanding, tolerance and patience can make all the difference.
I'll tell you what, if you go into the seats just there,
Right.
when we get there, I'll call you, okay?
Okay, madam.
I can't get on.
Let me help you. This way.
Thank you.
Can I have a look at that list?
Yes.
Chicken and cheese.
Oh,
Let's go this way.
thank you. Find out how to become dementia friendly. Contact Alzheimer's Society today.
It's always good. For me, if I was a caregiver, for example, I'd say, "Hi, Mrs. Smith, I'm Chris, your caregiver." Or "Good to meet you again," and say your name in case they're having trouble with name recall. Very important to let them know who you are. How many of you have had someone come up to you and act like they really knew you and you didn't know who the heck they were? And how did you feel? We don't want the people with dementia to feel that way. So let's give them some information. I think if you are working with someone on a regular basis in your office or your business, it's important to know something about them, something that you would be able to converse with them with, particularly when you first start the conversation. Because part of what's the most important thing with communication is that you develop a relationship with them where they feel comfortable with you. And that's going to be one of the greatest gifts that you can give them. Be prepared to listen. Sometimes when a person has dementia, people do not listen to them. As the bus driver and as everyone that she saw as she was going to the store. But it's important to listen. And if they're having difficulty speaking, to pick up on some words that might help you understand what they're saying. It's important on your behalf to give them up to 90 seconds to respond to any questions you may ask them. It may take longer for them to respond to you. Also, speak in a clear voice, and as we get older, we don't hear high pitches as well as others, and persons with dementia are no different. They need to have our voices sort of like a tone like this. I often say to staff, lower your voice, and they go, I can't do that in front of you. So I say, well, you know, you just need to practice in a mirror or something, because sometimes when people talk like this, the person can't hear them. Touch is important to communicate when they come into your office or wherever you may be, to do a handshake so they feel that connection to the world around them. What I have found, many people, as the disease progresses, they have difficulty with understanding what is being said, the words. And if you use gestures, sometimes that helps. If you want someone to sit down, that you go like this. Here's your seat. Also, sometimes people that can't understand the spoken word can understand the written word. So sometimes if you write it down, and I'll tell you a quick story about one of the ladies that I work with. She was a realtor and was a successful realtor, and she is now having trouble with her words. They aren't always coming out right. So we had a TV on HGTV, that, you know, where you see all those wonderful houses they sell, and the closed caption was going across, and she goes, they're selling that bungalow for $495,000. Things have really changed. Well, it was in Hawaii, you know, and so it's just this little teeny place. But I realized how important the written word is to her. She understood it perfectly well. But the spoken word, she was not understanding. So to think about that there's all sorts of possibilities of how we can communicate with them and try different things. It doesn't mean they don't know what's going on. Sometimes if they can't get the words out, they may very well know. Another important thing is to not talk about them when someone else is in the room, or when they're in the room. It's all of us have come into a room and someone was talking about us. And how did you feel? Yeah, awful, not good. So it's real important that we respect who they are and don't talk about them while they're there. Talk directly to them. It's important to develop trust. When a person that has any of the dementia trusts you, they're more apt to say more things and listen better to you. Trust is really important. Obviously, as the dementia progresses, the ability to communicate diminishes. But there are still ways we can communicate through smiles, through gestures, and just being kind to a person. I think most of these things that you have heard have been common sense things. Do you think so? But it's really important when we're with someone with dementia that we take the time to use common sense. And most of all, uphold who they are as a person. Because if I asked any of you, again, what's your greatest fear? You're going, oh, if I couldn't communicate, that would be terrible. And we wouldn't want to lose ourselves as a person. But if we respect people, no matter what disease they have, and treat them as a human being, then we've done a terrific job. And just having all of you here today to learn how to communicate and about different scenarios with persons with dementia means that you care. So all of us that are going to get dementia, it won't be all of us here, but so I hope you learned these lessons that I just taught you really well, in case you come across me and you have to talk to me in the future. But we do want Grand Rapids, we want Michigan, we want United States to be a friendly community. And until we learn how to communicate with these folks who are just people like us that just have dementia, we can make it a better place. So hopefully this is helpful in giving you a few hints on communication.
Good morning, everyone. Are you awake? I'm Mike Faber. I'm with Grand Rapids Community College and the Caregiver Resource Network, and I get the great job this morning of being the timekeeper. I guess they chose me as the teacher to keep time. We want this to be interactive today, but for that to happen, we have to follow a format so that it doesn't get chaotic, okay? And so the format is this. A panelist will present a case study or a scenario to the group. Listen very closely when they do so. Then they will ask you to open the envelope corresponding to that case study. Do not do so ahead of time. So they'll say case study 1, they'll ask you to open the envelope. It will have the case study written there along with 3 questions. You are asked as a group in 3 minutes, and the group is your table, so it's not a lot of time, 3 minutes to address those 3 questions. So you want to choose someone from your table, someone new each time, to be the recorder and presenter. Okay? Then we're only going to get 3 minutes basically to share some of the great findings, okay, that your groups have found. So not everyone will get a chance to share, but I will ask someone to share some of the key things that you as a group identified. Okay? And then we'll turn it back to the panelists who will go through in detail, breaking down the scenario and talking about basically their insights and the panelists' insights. When we've gone through all, I believe, 4 case studies, we're hoping to have some time left over for us to answer as a panel your questions, your additional questions around some of the situations you face in your day-to-day work with families, okay? So if you have those questions, jot them down throughout the morning so you don't forget them, and then I will coordinate that. So we're going to turn first to Suzanne Oglen-Han from Pine Rest, and she's going to take the first case scenario.
Thank you very much, Mike. Good morning. So what I'd like you to do is to take your envelope, number 1, and I'd like you to open it and pass one of the cases to each person at your table. So it's the blue case. And then we're going to read it together, all right? So does everyone have one? All right. Sam is a 77-year-old male with what appears to be a mixed dementia, both Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia. He and his wife of 56 years, Barb, moved from their home into a condo about 7 years ago. Sam has been known to get lost driving to new places for quite some time. Since this started happening, Barb always tries to go with him when he goes somewhere new. That way she can help point out stop signs too. Recently, his friend from church called wondering if Sam was okay since he hadn't showed up for coffee hour that morning. Barb was scared because Sam should have been there and home by now. Just then, Sam showed up at home with no idea where he'd been. He knew he was supposed to have been at the coffee hour, but he couldn't seem to figure out how to get to church. Even though Barb can drive, Sam has always driven the 2 of them when they're together. What should Barb do? So the questions that we want, that's the question we want you to answer is what should Barb do? And we want you to think about 3 different pieces. What do you say to the person that's got dementia? What is she supposed to say to Sam? What do you say to the family that's involved here? And then we'll talk some about resources. So what to say, what should Barb do in this situation? So you have 3 minutes, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Go. Okay, we need everyone's attention. I know we could talk about these all day, all right, but we need to make sure we have enough time for the panelists. So, again, we only have 3 minutes. Who thinks they have a terrific response? Terrific response. Okay, in terms of what to say to Barb in this case. Okay, let's talk about Barb a minute. What would you say to Barb? Anyone? Don't be afraid. Is your hand up, Linda? Sure. Okay, here, you take the microphone.
Probably what to say to Barb is, you know, she needs to maybe express to him his concern, try to get to go to the doctor and maybe have the doctor sort of, sometimes it's easier coming from somebody else other than your spouse, sort of say what's going on and maybe something's wrong and just have it checked out.
Anyone else have advice for Barb? Anyone have ideas of what Barb should, okay, in the back.
John Stafford. We talked about a couple different approaches that Barb can try to give her husband. One of them is, you know, I'm worried. You can't do this to me because I'm worried. And another one is, you know, because of your illness, safety, concerned about your safety. And then a third one was working with an attorney or with the doctor or somebody in authority. Also recommending a license test through the Secretary of State. So, you know, somebody can have an official determination.
Thank you. It's John, right? Thanks, John. Okay, one more, and then we're going to go to Suzanne.
Well, I think it'd be good to emphasize that it's more than just Sam and Barb that are at risk to Barb, because there are people killed every day across the country. Sometimes several people with someone with dementia driving into a crowd or driving into a building with people inside and that sort of thing. And I think often the caregiver and the person with dementia doesn't think about those are the people that get injured and killed more than the person with dementia. You know, there's a big risk to other people, and Barb ought to realize that.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Great input. We're going to turn it back to Suzanne now.
Okay, very good input. So what should Barb do? One of the things Barb needs to figure out is Sam aware that this is a problem, or is Sam not aware that this is a problem? Because depending on where he is with his Alzheimer's disease, if in fact that's the correct diagnosis, one of the things that happens with Alzheimer's disease is people lose their ability to have awareness about what their experience is. So it might be that Sam is coming home and kind of like, oh yeah, not a problem. Or he may be very upset that this has happened. It's of course much easier if he has some awareness that this is a problem and if he's distressed about it. But I completely agree with you, Linda, that to get someone else involved is very important. Usually what I encourage families is you don't actually need to be the one that says, Dad, you can't drive anymore. You can make somebody else out there have that job, because there are people out there that have that job. And so if the medical professional, the primary care physician, isn't comfortable being able to make an evaluation about that, depending on what else is going on, you could send somebody for a driver evaluation, which somebody mentioned, through the Secretary of State. There's a small fee for that. If somebody has more financial resources, you can actually send them to Mary Freebed here in town, and they will do a driver safety evaluation that's 2 parts, and they will do rehabilitation. So if somebody is not is able to continue driving, but is having some difficulties, they will coach them through or train them through what they need to do, and then perhaps say, you need to come back in 6 months for another evaluation, something like that. This would also be a possibility where you could send someone for neuropsych testing if you are concerned about other issues besides just the driving issue, because they'll assess visual spatial functioning, which will help you be able to determine if the person needs a driver safety evaluation or not. The other thing we don't know about this case is, are there kids involved? You know, do the kids have kids? Do Sam and Barb have grandkids? Are the grandkids still riding with Grandpa in the car, or are the grandkids not riding with Grandpa in the car anymore? Because that is sometimes a barometer. If grandkids don't ride with Grandpa anymore, that usually is a sign parents don't really feel safe about that. So that's really kind of a litmus test of we need to work towards this sooner rather than later. The other piece is losing your ability to drive, particularly if you're a male, is a really big deal. So the loss issues that are involved with that and kind of the insults to your independence and figuring out what that's going to mean. The other piece is This is also really a big deal to Barb, because her life is going to change dramatically if Sam's not able to drive anymore. But one of the questions would be, does Barb feel safe with him? Does Barb feel like when she gets in the car she isn't safe? Because there's lots of families that we've worked with where the wives will say, oh, I'm terrified every time I get into the car. Well, that's a sure sign Sam probably needs not to be driving anymore. So I don't know if other people on the panel have other things that they'd like to add.
I will mention one angle that I never would have thought of, but I've heard from families that it's been fairly effective. If a family is trying to talk their parent into no longer driving, to me, the number one concern is the safety, as you mentioned. However, that doesn't always get through to them. I guess maybe they don't realize how unsafe they are. Sometimes mentioning to them that is a big financial liability. If they were to get into an accident, then that could threaten their financial security because of lawsuits, particularly if they've already been diagnosed with something, then that's a vulnerability. And I've heard from the field that people have actually been swayed by that argument when they haven't been swayed by the safety argument. So just one more thing to think of.
It occurred to me that Barb could ask some of his friends to pick him up when they're going to coffee or wherever they were going. But the other thing would be to, sometimes we've recommended disabling the car. The only thing I can think of is a flat tire, but I think there's something you can do under the hood. I don't know. But you could always flatten the tire or hide the keys and say, oh my gosh, we can't find the keys, we better call your friend and have him come and pick you up. That's kind of a backdoor way of getting at it till something else happens, but we don't want to wait for a crisis to happen.
I guess we're just passing it right down the road here, aren't we? I think there's one of the things that struck me as people were talking is that a lot of times we want to come up with like one golden bullet or one silver bullet that's going to answer the questions and going to make everything stop. And it doesn't work that way. So using different kinds of things. I know that oftentimes one of the first things that we want to try and do is reason or rationalize with the person of why they should or should not be driving. But oftentimes one of the first things to go with someone with dementia is in the earlier stage is that ability to use logic and reason. So when those things aren't working, when you're having those kinds of conversation, that should be a little bit of a trigger that that person's losing that ability to understand and have that kind of insight. So moving on to some of the other kinds of things, and again, if you're going to be pulling back on something like driving, it's always a good idea to see what other kinds of things you can have in there to replace it, like having somebody pick somebody up or scheduling something, finding out what kinds of things that the person normally goes to. Do they go down and to the senior center and play cards, or do they have a church appointment that they go to every evening, or on certain evenings, or whatever? Do they go to the gym? Whatever their routine is, you would want to try and make sure that that helps. What kind of resources you have are going to help that person continue to be engaged in that activity, so that they don't become isolated. Do you want to add anything, Chris? Chris does not. One thing we were going to say too is the earlier you can have that conversation, the better. So in the state of Michigan, when somebody gets a diagnosis of Alzheimer's dementia, their license is not immediately revoked. It's not like that in all states. In California, if you get a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, you're done driving. So oftentimes when somebody's going through the diagnostic process, I will talk about that and say, where are you with driving cessation, the stopping of driving? Because we know if this diagnosis is correct, in fact, at some point you won't be able to drive. And that's going to be really hard for you, and it's going to be really hard for your family. It's a real change. So to have that conversation and see how it goes. Yeah, I just wanted to add, you made me think of something. that part about having that conversation early is hugely important, because it's much easier for somebody to give up the keys than to take the keys. And we've even had folks come in where early in that conversation, they come up with a contract. And I've actually had folks come into our office after we've had some of those conversations, because their person's in an early enough stage in the disease where they're actively engaged in that problem solving. And they'll come up with a regular contract in terms of when I see this happening, because that way the person has an opportunity to say, well, what's important to me and when should I stop driving? And then their partner can say, you know, kind of keep tabs on that. So when that time occurs, even though the person may not remember that that's what they said, if there's somebody there that they trust, then that person can go and say, okay, these are the things that we talked about, and you signed this statement, we both signed this statement, this is our contract that we put together. And it's been effective with a few folks that have come in our office.
I'd like to add just one thing. Also, it's very important you find whatever leverage point you can in someone's life. Everyone's different, and relationships are different. It may be in this case that Barb isn't the best person to approach Sam. Maybe in their decision-making process, Sam always called all the shots, and he's not used to listening to Barb. So sometimes what you have to do is identify whoever it is that they're most apt to listen to or respond to. It may not be the wife, it may not be the adult daughter, maybe it's the eldest son. Maybe it's someone in authority like the clergy, the member of clergy, which applies to a number of you in the room who are from churches. Maybe it's the attorney or the doctor. So use whatever leverage point is most likely to be successful as well. And should we transition to Kathy and the case scenario 2 now?
Envelope number 2. It's green. John and Mary Smith are in their early 80s, living in their home of 40 years. John has been experiencing TIAs, which are minor strokes, with continuing cognitive decline. He is unable to handle financial or household chores, which are now Mary's responsibilities. His physical health is declining, where he is more fatigued and experiencing falls more often. His wife, Mary's health is also declining. She has been in and out of the hospital with severe back pain and breathing problems. They do not want to move to a facility or have help come into the home because they don't feel they need help. They do not want to move to a facility and leave their home. Their 2 children visit about once a month and are getting worried about their parents living in their home, but whenever they try to bring up their concerns, John and Mary quickly dismiss the conversation, saying they are fine where they are. What should John and Mary's children do? So you're going to be discussing it from the perspective of what can the kids do to help their parents when they don't want help?
Okay, you have 3 minutes, go. Okay, it's time. I need everyone to come back to the group. Time. Again, I know we could talk all day on these. Okay, what advice would you give to the children? Who wants to share that hasn't already shared? Come on, how about some of these tables over here? I know you have great ideas. Marcia, I'm looking right at you. How about you?
Well, we were talking about having someone, if not the children, somebody who is familiar with dementia, to point out the pros and cons of what it would be like to live somewhere else, instead of being afraid of being alone and falling, or the more friendships you would have instead of just having a phone call from your daughter once a month or something. And have somebody kind of like present that to them as options. Yeah, we talked about a lot of things, but that's one of them.
Okay, so bringing in a professional then. Okay, Shelley.
We said maybe go back to the conversation. Don't let them dismiss the conversation. Make it a point to have the conversation, whether they want to or not. Point out the things that they're struggling with. Maybe the things they can't do anymore, if it's grocery shopping, things like that. Offer to pay for it yourself to get some help into the home if you can't do it yourself. And then maybe give them a couple of choices, you know, either do this or you could do that. But we can't always make decisions for them yet.
Anyone else? Okay, back table. Excuse me.
I think it's important to research all your options, and home care is an option, to bring in a home care agency to talk with your loved one and explain that you can stay in your own home independently and safely. Sometimes we've had to say you're one fall away from leaving your home permanently. Sometimes that gets their attention. And then another thing that we do is just say, let's give this a try. Let's give it a week or two and see how things go. You set your own schedule. We can come in one time a week for a couple hours or whatever you're comfortable with. And, you know, just sort of start the process gradually. So I think a big misconception with families is that assisted living is covered by Medicare, and it's not. It's private pay as well. So that kind of plays into things as well.
All right. One more, and then we're going to go right to Kathy.
I would encourage families to just start looking at different assisted living communities. If the home care option did not work, you can find out why are the parents, you know, saying, I don't want to move. Are they thinking that the next move would be a long-term nursing care environment? I mean, what are the parents thinking? Because there are so many different options, whether it's an independent living community with some different services, assisted living community, or, you know, just moving somewhere, having them, having families look, see what's maybe important to the parent. There's lots of life enrichment, lots of people who positives moving to a community. You can also tell your parents that it would be potentially just a short term. Give it a try. If it's something that you don't like, you can always go back home. You don't have to sell the house, but try it and see how you like it.
Okay, thank you everyone for sharing. Kathy.
Those are great answers. Thank you. One thing is with this scenario, we're looking at a couple, a husband and a wife, even though the husband has been identified as having some cognitive decline. The biggest thing I would recommend and try to remember is that parents remember their role. That means they know they're the parent. So when kids come in and start, as they would put it, ordering them around, they'll say, I'm your mother, I'm your father, you don't talk to me like that. So we have to be very careful when we're talking to the parents, or when Suzanne and I are working with the children of families, that we make sure they remember that the parents remember their parents, that they are the mom or the dad. So one thing is with the kids, they're coming about once a month. So I would recommend increasing that time coming into the home to observe and see what's going on, to see if mom's doing okay with meals, with transportation to doctor's appointments, to see if the bills are being paid, and they can offer to help. There's lots of steps between living in your home and moving. So a lot of that in between probably should be explored before we throw at them, you have to get out of here. One thing I know that I've seen in my practice is if you've been in your home for 40 plus years, you don't even want to think about moving because of all the stuff. Especially if you have to downsize, what do you do with everything? Oh, I'll just stay here. I'll let the kids deal with it after I'm gone. And the kids get mad because mom and dad never did anything about it. So these two children could come in and say, do you mind if I clean out my old bedroom? Or do you mind if we start working on the basement? Very cautiously, very carefully, because it's mom and dad's stuff and they don't want you coming in and cleaning out everything. So that's one thing that the kids could do to help. I like the idea of offering to pay for groceries or for some help to come in. Basically, housekeeping and meals are pretty not very interfering with their lives. It's not like somebody needs help to go to the bathroom or something like that. Less threatening. Thank you. Intrusive. Here's another. My buddies are helping me out up here. So that's one thing. Now I'm going to go back to the financial. If they can see that bills are piling up, they could say, Mom, do you need some help with these bills? I know Dad always did it, but maybe I could step in for him and help you sort them out. Always try to let her be the one directing the activity, but you're kind of steering it to where you think you need to step in. The other thing is, I'm going to go back to that level, all the levels of care. I usually present it as a circle of help. The person or the couple are in the middle of this, like a bullseye thing, like the Target logo. The first circle of help is family. What kind of family can you bring in? Can these daughters bring in some cousins? Is there a brother in another state that might be able to help out? If not physically, maybe financially. Then after you've looked at the family, then you can look at maybe some neighbors that are close to them, friends that might be able to bring meals or help with transportation or just visiting. After friends, then you look at maybe people from the church if they belong to a church. There might be groups at the church that do come in and help older people. Then you would look probably after that at maybe adult day services for Dad if he needs to get out of the house and Mom needs some respite. After that, you'd look at hiring home health care, hiring people to come in. She's so adamantly opposed to it that maybe just getting her used to people she knows coming in, she might be wanting to have some help come in. After that, it would be moving. The other thing I would recommend is that the kids ask Mom and Dad, if you had to move, where would you want to go? And see if they've got anything rolling around in their head. But not right now, but I've often thought about this one place that maybe we might want to go to. I would recommend the kids go there and get an application and maybe start the paperwork, get on a waiting list, because there will be a crisis, and that's when things will change and you won't have any control. Dad falls and breaks the hip and goes to the hospital. He probably is not coming back home. So it's nice to have that plan B where, well, we do have his name on the waiting list at such and such. Maybe we could call them and move it up a little bit. So I always think it's good to have a backup place in your mind. Now I'm going to talk about resources. Chris here at Clark there's a program called Dementia Home Consultation, where, do you still do it or someone? Okay, Chris and a registered nurse go into the home, and together they do a consultation with the family, with everybody, maybe some changes in the home that would keep Dad from falling more, or recommendations of what other help they need. And then the whole family is present, right, when that's going on. Senior Neighbors has a case management program if you want to refer Mom and Dad to them, and someone will come in and, again, see what's going on. Elizabeth Harrell, Harrell, has a Crossroads Elder Care Planning company. It's a free service to seniors and families to help find a place. A big thing in all this is financial. Mom and Dad really hate to give up any financial information. Elizabeth here knows about that. So where you go and what services you have, I hate to say it, a lot of it depends on how much money you have. And so it really is helpful if the kids can find out what kind of money there is that they're working with. Also, you have to ask if there's a power of attorney in place. Dad probably has mom as a power of attorney. Mother should not have dad because he can't make those decisions, so she'll have to pick someone else. And that's where you would probably want to bring in a family attorney if there is one. Also enlist the help of a primary doctor to find out mom's prognosis physically, if she's going to be able to take care of dad for much longer. Oh, there's so much.
That was great, Kathy. One of the things sometimes I do with families is encourage the kids to have conversations with mom and dad about how things went with grandma and grandpa. What was their experience? What do they remember? And oftentimes for the adult kids, they were around and part of that. But that can be a nice way to just give context to, so this is, in our family, this is what happens as someone ages, and this is a model of how our family does this. So let's remember our legacy and how do we want this to go for us. So.
Just when Kathy was talking about the parents remembering that they're the parents and not the other way around, I think that same holds true for kids. That a lot of times we're used to having that relationship, that one kind of relationship with our parents that we all have, where they're used to making the decisions, they're used to guiding us, they're used to doing all of those other kinds of things that we've grown up with and we've been accustomed to. And then the challenge becomes, how do you transition and how do you start making those decisions and how do you start being more involved in that decision-making process? And that's a really difficult transition both ways. So starting with some of the things that have been proposed up here and trying to start having some of those conversations, start looking at what kinds of preferences people have, what kinds of things are going on. And the nice thing that I liked about, well, I liked a lot of things about what Kathy said, but anyway, about getting in there a little bit more often, because that also gives you a chance to find out and to develop some other kinds of insight into what's going on. Because a lot of times it's really easy to, to pop in every couple of months or whatever and see things and make decisions and judgments and that sort of thing, and then pop out and then wonder why parents aren't taking care of things. But that gives you a little better idea of what the day-to-day kinds of challenges are. That also is a way of getting in there, and as your parent or this person gets used to you being around a little bit more, that relationship has a little bit more opportunities to start changing and transitioning.
Well, I think the reality is not everyone has a great relationship with their parents, and that's the other side of it. These all sound sort of rosy over on this side, so I'm going to bring up the fact that sometimes the relationships are a bit strained. But in a situation where you have someone with dementia, oftentimes you're it, and it doesn't matter whether or not you have a good relationship or not. But if that does happen to you and you are it, then you do need to try to start to build a relationship, and remember that the person has something that is occurring in the brain, and they are going to need help. And I have a lot of families come into my office that say, I don't know anything about them. I've been away from home. I don't know about their finances or anything. But the reality is you might just sort of get stuck with doing it. And at that point, you really, if you have other siblings that are sort of feeling the same way, hopefully you have a good relationship with your siblings and get them all together and start talking about this. What are we going to do? and we is the word, and obviously not everyone in the family is going to be able to participate as much as others, but the reality is we all have dysfunctional families, you know, somewhere along the line, and sometimes it's going to be neighbors, sometimes it's going to be churches that are going to step in, but sorry, I had to say that, yeah.
Okay, Joy, it's time. We need to move into scenario 3.
So behind door number 3 on your table, behind door number 3 on your table, and we are going to talk about some long distance caregiving kinds of things. So, Linda lives in Colorado. Her mother, Alice, lives in Michigan. Her mother is starting to become forgetful. Linda is concerned that her mother may not be taking her medication. Her friends at church say that she is missing her Bible class that she has faithfully attended for years. The neighbors have seen her outside in the dark tending to her garden. What should Linda do?
Okay, it's time, everyone. Need you to pull back together. All right, so Linda comes to you. Linda's in town here for a visit to Mom. She comes to you and she asks for your input. What do you recommend to Linda in this case? How about this side of the room? Anyone? Anyone? Okay, right over here.
Okay, so we did talk about Linda coming, planning a visit, that's really important. So if that's feasible, to have her come and visit with her mother. So she can sort of develop a support group, maybe with her neighbors, the church, to sort of find out, investigate a little bit to see, is her mother working in the garden regularly in the evening? And try to determine, you know, really what's going on. Planning a visit to the doctor to rule out anything medical. And to start getting some things in place because of the long distance paperwork. Making sure that maybe she can get access to medical information from a distance. And maybe opening up the conversation to the mother, is she willing to move closer to her? And I think that was kind of all the things we discussed.
Who else? Don't be shy. Anyone? Okay, I guess you covered it all, Tanya. Good job. We can move on to the next scenario. No, not yet. So let's go back to Joy.
Thank you. That was very good. Are you starting to see some patterns here in terms of what's happening at home and what's happening away from home and all those kinds of things about it's certainly important to start looking for details and before you jump to conclusions, looking at what kinds of options are out there. But I think long distance caregiving is very difficult because it has the emotional attachment, regardless of whether you're on good terms with your family or not, because it's more difficult to pop in. And oftentimes when we get calls at our office, it's because somebody's been visiting, they haven't seen Mom or Dad for a while, and they notice some things when they get there. So certainly if you have an opportunity to make some more frequent visits, but certainly going back and forth from Michigan to Colorado is going to be a little bit of a challenge. Looking at things like what you mentioned in terms of when you're having those conversations or when you're visiting, looking at things like, what does the house look like? And I'm talking about starting out kind of first with kinds of eyes-on kinds of things. But what does the house look like? Is it cluttered when it normally has been kept up? What's the kitchen looking like? Is there food in the refrigerator that maybe has been uneaten, or there's other kinds of things around? So what you're looking for are some telltale kinds of things. Are bills getting paid? You know, how much access do you have to financial information? So before you can start looking at what kind of the next steps are, you really need to assess what's going on. And that may require having somebody come in and do that assessment if you're not eyes on. So looking at what kinds of resources are available in the community to do that. And certainly a first place to start all across the country, we have area agencies on aging, and those are a wonderful resource to start with because they can connect you with a lot of different resources. The Alzheimer's Association, you can go online to our alz.org, and you can go into, there's some ways in there, and I've got some information over here, but my point is that they have ways that you can go in there and identify what area you live in, and it'll help you connect with resources that are out of state. I think probably within the professions that you all have colleagues and things like that that you would be able to access so that you can find out what kinds of resources might be available in the geographic area that that person's in. The other kinds of things that you might want to look at then is certainly moving is one of the things to come up depending on what's going on and what some of the other resources that you've tapped into. I think a lot of the things that Kathy talked about in terms of family, in terms of your religious community, all of those kinds of things to find out if they're available, if they're being utilized, all of those kinds of things. I'm guessing that it's not always the typical that you don't have some contact with a family member if they're living long distance. You might not see them as often, but you're probably having some kind of contact. So during phone conversations, that kind of thing, start listening for changes, start listening for things that are going to alert you that things are changing and that resources are becoming more and more important to engage in them. What have I missed that because we've covered a lot of the same kinds of things. Oh, I know, I was talking about the long-term care options, but also looking at what other kinds of things. Does the person want to move back to Michigan? Although I think those snowy winters are probably about the same, but anyway. But looking at the kinds of preferences the person has. And if the person does want to move back, other options are always things like people often will say, well, I want mom or dad to come in and live with me. So looking at what kinds of things, is that reasonable? Does the person want to live you through? What are the needs of that person going to be? Do you as a caregiver, as you're talking with families and planning, is your house set up to do that? What kind of financial and time limitations are you going to have? Because one of the things, and Suzanne can speak to this even better than I can, is just the amount of impact that that's going to have on a caregiver if you choose to do something like that. Because oftentimes the person that's going to be the primary person, if they have to stay home, winds up either leaving their job or reducing their hours. And generally that's the female. So that has some long-term implications in terms of that person's financial resources later on because of loss of income and the impact that it has on Social Security and that sort of thing. So for your legal financial people out there, that's something that families need to be aware of if those kinds of things are options that you're considering. So talk to the folks that we've already talked about in terms of planners, resources. You're just doing it from a long distance, so you're probably going to spending a little more time on the phone possibly, finding out what resources are in that area, tapping into other professional organizations that can help you with some eyes, finding out about that religious community maybe that she's engaged in, because this little scenario tells me that this little lady is a little bit further along than just problems with a little forgetfulness if she's out in the middle of the night tending to her garden. So those are some real safety issues, because that's certainly a person that's going to be at risk for wandering away. So what kind of safety measures are necessary for you to get engaged in? So any? Sure.
I think that's a good option.
Sure. One of the things that the Alzheimer's Association offers is Medical Alert Safe Return, and it's a very low tech. It's the bracelet. In fact, I brought some things over here, and I'll tell you a second why I'm really excited about this in another way. But and we always encourage that folks have the Medical Alert Safe Return bracelet for the caregiver as well. The Medical Alert Safe Return is a national database of information about the person with dementia is registered. And then if a good Samaritan or first responder finds that person, they can call the number on the back of that bracelet, and then they're connected with that database, and then they're able to contact the person that's first in line or their emergency contact. We do that for the caregiver as well, because caregivers never think that anything's going to happen to them. and I can kind of click down different examples of when things have happened to caregivers and their person may be at home and they haven't been able to get back and get in touch with that caregiver. So we've had situations where persons with dementia have been left at home for several hours because something happened to their caregiver. Now, the exciting thing that I'm excited about now is the Prine family here in Grand Rapids gave us a wonderful gift, and right now we're able to offer both of those for free. So if I brought some of, but it just needs to come through our office. So if you have folks that you're working with that that you think would be helpful to register with the Medical Alert Safe Return, there's some brochures up here, or give me a call or come stop by our office or whatever. It's very low tech, but they still find that people are found 4 times faster by just having that identification as opposed to not having anything on. So I didn't mean to get up here and plug the Alzheimer's Association, but it's a wonderful opportunity right now to do that, because I always tell folks that it's generally not if, it's when, and people don't practice. So if you are working with someone and their family member has dementia, or your person you're working with has dementia, the risk is significant. So back to long distance caregiving.
You know, Joy's right. The long distance caregiving is very challenging, but not nearly as challenging as it was before the internet. So you mentioned the websites, and I just wanted to follow up with that to say that you could, the daughter in Colorado can start doing internet searches. She can follow up by making phone calls, maybe interview some professionals over the phone, schedule some appointments when she happens to be in town visiting mom, where they can go together and meet with folks and get these things in place. So that's a real benefit to have that option. Then the people that are working with mom here in Michigan can keep her informed via email, update reports, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I was going to say too, so we'll just say this is a healthy family, right? So that this is a loving daughter who really wants to be helpful to mom. So if she is, I mean, one of the things she might consider is calling every day at a certain time and checking in with mom. That's something that can not take a lot of time, but can help get a pulse on what's going on. She might meet with the people at the church, with mom's friends, and set up some sort of more structure of who's going to be checking in and how is that going to go. If, you know, all the things that you mentioned too, getting medical people involved, and the safe return. If this is an unhealthy family, and this is the only daughter and she doesn't want much to do with mom, and she comes to visit once a year for 24 hours, and she pops in and finds out that this has happened, it's a whole different ballgame then. And I think we all know families where that's the way things are too. So then it might be that maybe people in the church want to step in or figure out what services need to be involved in a more systematic way. So.
My turn. Is that it? Okay.
Elizabeth.
All right. Number 4. If you would open number 4. Read that. The hot pink. All right. Moss and Fern Green are both in their mid-80s and have been married for 20 years. I have to be careful not to use real clients' names, so that's why I got a little creative with that. They've been married for about 20 years. Now, I did have one couple that had been married almost as long as I have, about 30-something years, and that was their second marriage. So this is fairly common to have a very long second marriage. But their children are each from previous marriages. And it says here they live in town. It really doesn't matter for this particular case whether they're in town or out of town. Some of the same issues are going to come up. The children don't know each other very well. And 2 of them got into it during the wedding reception and really haven't spoken since. So that's a little awkward. Moss has always handled the couple's finances, her money and his money. But recently, Fern is finding late notices from Consumers Energy or DTE, and they're having some overdrafts on their checking account. So there's definitely some issues going on with the bill paying. Moss is struggling with short-term memory loss and is frequently confused. And Fern herself has some physical issues that she has been struggling with as well. She's not completely healthy either. So what should Fern do at this point?
Okay, you have 3 minutes. I'm sure you've all solved the problems of the world now in 3 minutes. It's like speed dating, isn't it? Okay. All right, what would you recommend to Fern? What would you recommend to Fern? Someone we haven't heard from? Okay, well, we'll go back to Doug.
I'd say the first thing she ought to do is get an appointment with an attorney and separate their assets out and create different trusts. Well, each of them have their own trust and their separate wills. That'll get the kids out of fighting, because the thing the kids will fight most about is control over finances and have a problem if mom takes over the finances and be distrustful and everything. So the more they can get the finances and the legal issues out of the way, the easier it'll be to deal with the kids cooperatively.
Okay. Good. Who else? Who else? Okay, right over here. Jillian.
I'm thinking if you're talking about people like that I work with that are lower income, they could never pay a lawyer to do that kind of a thing. So maybe a payee service that would be less expensive to kind of just handle that for Fern.
Anyone else? Okay.
The group has some good ideas about getting the family together at a meeting, just pulling everybody together and having some discussion about the issue so that there's open communication, because a lot of the problems come up because of suspicion and lack of communication.
Anyone else? Okay, up front. Here you go.
My thought is more on the financial side, because there's overdrafts in the account that could be something that fishy is going on. And I think she needs to bring in both family sides to go to the bank with her to verify and see what's going on and make sure that the father isn't being scammed by whomever. I've seen that happen.
All right, thank you, Bonnie. One more, and then we're going to go to Elizabeth.
We also talked about Fern going to her own PCP, her own doctor, and making sure that her health is good. And while she's talking to the doctor, hopefully talking about the stress of her husband and getting a referral to somewhere in the community that could help her.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Elizabeth, nice place to start.
Okay, great. I think I'm going to change the order here. Instead of, I'm going to start with what I say to Fern and the family, and then we'll go back to talking with the senior. I heard a lot of good comments here. So we'll come back to some of that. First of all, when you're working with this type of situation and with families, sometimes it's important to remember who the focus is on. And the focus is on Moss and Fern here. So you're going to have some very strong personalities potentially with these adult children. And so you need to keep bringing the focus back to the couple themselves. But the family meeting idea is absolutely right on. A lot of times, especially in cases where they haven't spoken to each other, they're just going by hearsay and what one told the other, or what they heard from mom, or what they heard from dad, which may not always be entirely accurate. If they're scattered geographically and can't come all together, even a conference call where things can be covered, where everyone's hearing the same information at the same time, and a lot of misunderstandings maybe can be cleared up at that point. The family also should be aware that there's no need to completely cut Moss out of these discussions. Sometimes people don't realize that if someone has dementia, especially depending on what type of dementia it is, they may have hours or days of perfect clarity. And they're capable of making decisions, and they're capable at times of knowing exactly what's going on. And then their input is important, and their viewpoint is important. And at times, as was mentioned, they do lose judgment. So they may be subject to scam, but they may also be giving money away. I've seen that before. So the giving patterns can change, and that can really undermine financial security as well. So that's why it's important to keep Moss in the loop and to kind of figure out what he's thinking and what's going on with that, and not necessarily go behind his back or be secretive about what's going on. And then in terms of what I would say to Moss at this point is, let's start with making him comfortable. And he is more likely to open up if he is relaxed and doesn't feel threatened. One way to do that is to meet with him in his home. Instead of sending him downtown to an attorney's office that's very formal and stiff that he's never seen before, the attorney can come to his home and meet with him and talk with him and the family, Fern as well. Sometimes as professionals, us in our daily lives, we have our task list and we're going through 1, 2, 3, just checking things off. That is not going to be the best thing for this couple. These things have to sometimes be repeated over and over again. They have to get used to the idea. You have to go slow, and you need to listen to what their needs and their concerns are. They may be worried about something that is a total misconception, but you're not going to know how to address that misconception unless you listen to them and hear what they're saying that they're concerned about. In terms of getting help in with the bills, whether it be a payee service or any number of other types of services they could get, I would approach it cautiously with Moss and say something like, it might be good to arrange for some help with chores around the house and bill paying so that you can focus on Fern and her health, and the two of you can have more time together. Or let's work together for a month or two on this and then see how it goes and then see what you want to do. My experience has been, once folks are relieved of some of these onerous tasks, they love it. They can't even remember why they ever wanted to hang on to it for so long. So if you start easy, give them that option. I think you'll find that once they've gotten some help and learned to trust someone with these tasks, that it won't be quite as threatening to them. Another tact is to mention how complicated things are these days for everyone. And when you consider that someone in their 80s was born in the late 20s, 30s, and how much things have changed in terms of even the number of bills that we have to pay. It's really astounding. So for them, it is a lot more complicated than maybe what their parents went through or their grandparents went through. So just affirm that with them and say, you have a lot going on in your life right now. How can I make things less stressful? What can I take off of you and get some help? In terms of meeting with the attorney, I want to address the separate trusts and separate wills and that sort of thing. These second marriages can be quite complicated. You'll take something that is an issue for anyone with dementia, and it's just magnified when you've got the second family to adjust to. Sometimes they already have completely separate funds and separate trust, but one or the other still pays the bills and takes care of it all, or they each take money from their trust and put it in a joint household account. If the money has been commingled for 20-something years and you go to the attorney and maybe start the process of separating, I think that could be a lightning rod for some drama. At that point, it's just gonna come a little sooner than later. We have to get back to who we're focusing on, and Moss and Fern have made this marriage work for a lot of years, and they came to some kind of understanding earlier in the marriage on the finances, and so maybe see what that is first, and then if they do need updating of some of their legal documents and maybe some adjustments to the trust, then you can go to that step next. Resources. I would start with, I love the bullseye that Kathy was describing. So you start with the family and then the people they're most comfortable with, and that may be their own attorney, their investment advisor, who's the son of the investment advisor they started with 50 years ago, people they have history with, people that know them well and that they know well. And even if that person isn't the one to do the job, then maybe they can recommend. If their attorney is more, his practice is geared more toward corporate work or real estate, then maybe he could help steer them toward an elder law attorney that's a little more focused on what they need right now. But start with their own team of advisors. Sometimes if you can't get the conference call or the family meeting together, you should look at family counseling. And this is where those of you from the church backgrounds might be able to make some suggestions. A geropsychologist is going to have a little more background in some of the issues that seniors are facing, so that's always a good option. And no one has mentioned this yet, so I'm going to give the commercial. In your packet, you have caregiverresource.net website. This is an organization, a nonprofit group that I think has its roots with GRCC and the area agency, and they have a phenomenal website of resources that has all kinds of different services available to seniors that you can do searches on. And that's a great place to go to find counseling services, for example, or all kinds of other things that are geared toward people. There's also good articles on there. Mike can tell you a lot more about that if you want to. If things get to the point where someone needs to step in from the outside and help them deal with their finances, there are professional guardians and professional power of attorney that sometimes are a better choice if there are these conflicts in the family among the adult children. And Waterway, Willow, Warfel, and Bronzick have done a lot of this work. I love this group because their background is business and psychology, which is the perfect combination for dealing with these sorts of situations. And they've done it before, and they've done it for years, and they're know what to look for and how to handle a lot of these situations. Another option, if things really get contentious and you start hearing words like lawsuit and taken to court, is get them into mediation. I know Caroline Dellenbush is an elder law attorney in town, and she has had some special training and mediation. There's also Robert Wright has the Peace Talks organization that does mediation. There are other places as well around, and that could be one way to steer them. Ladies, gentlemen.
I want to just talk about something, and it could apply to this situation, but I think it applies to almost every family situation that we talked about today, and probably the things that you all run across. And we kind of skirted on the issue, but I want to talk about it because I think it's really important, and that's the issue of resistance. You know, 9 times out of 10, someone may resist the kinds of things that they need. It may be the caregiver that resists the assistance to help them, because we find that the majority of family caregivers do not take advantage of any community resources to support them. So only about 10 to 20% of family caregivers take advantage of all the wonderful resources that exist in the community. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes I think it's because they don't self-identify as a caregiver. In other words, they see themselves instead in their family role as a husband, a wife, a son, a daughter, a grandson, granddaughter, a sibling, and they don't see themselves in the caregiving role. But often they also have this sense of burden that they have to do it all themselves. And the reality is, as professionals, one of the things that I think we have to do is help people to understand that they are not alone, that 1 in 4 households in America are involved in some type of family care. Here in Kent County, it's about 1 in 3. And that they're going to do a better job if they allow themselves some support from the community. It will enhance what they do. It will not take away from what they do. And then the individual themselves who may have the dementia or be in need of care can often be resistant to that care. The one thing I would suggest about resistance is sort of consider the source. There's a reason why people are resistant. And resistance it plays a role, and oftentimes it helps people deal with their own anxiety or their fear. I think the number one cause for resistance is fear. People fear loss of control, they fear loss of independence, loss of mobility with the driving, whatever it may be. If we don't address their fears or the reason for their resistance, we're not going to be able to help them. So that goes back to what we started the day with when Chris talked about good communication. You know, and unfortunately, not all families have really great dynamics or great communication. So as professionals, one of the things that we have to do is help families to do a better job of communicating and help families to understand underlying causes for resistance, like fear, so that they can address those issues, so that they can move forward. And sometimes it takes a third party, a disinterested third party, like a professional up here, to help in those conversations. And so that's something that I highly recommend that you use in your toolbox when working with families, that you help them to better communicate and help them to understand causes for why some of these resistance may be occurring. Anything from anyone else? Otherwise, here we have now about 15 minutes for an opportunity for question and answer for you while you're thinking about your questions, because let me tell you, it's rare that you can get a panel of such esteemed experts here in one place at one time to try to answer your questions. So perhaps you know some situations that you're dealing with and you need some input. Before we do that, though, let me just real quick plug. In your packet, there is something here on the Kent County Senior Millage Services. There are, if you are here in Kent County, we have 43 different types of services in Kent County through the Kent County Senior Millage to support families and caregivers and aging individuals in our community. So I want you to take this fact sheet and take it back to your office, because this becomes a good resource guide for you, along with the Caregiver Resource Network website. I want to just say one quickly for those of you in Kent County that the Kent County Senior Millage is up for renewal on August 5th, and we need your help. The Senior Millage last year in 2013 served 17,000 individuals 60 and older in our community with 43 different types of services, as you see. We need to continue this service. The millage goes up for renewal on 8-year cycles. Okay, so we've now had 2 8-year cycles. Both of those cycles, we asked for 1/3 of a mil. And at 1/3 of a mil, as you can imagine, with property taxes shrinking, the amount we've had to spend has been shrinking at the time the population, the aging population, is increasing. So in the last 5 years, we went from having $7.1 million to spend in the millage to $6.1 million. We lost $1 million in property tax. And as you can imagine, at the same time the population is aging based on the baby boomers who are turning 65 at the rate of 10,000 a day. And that will continue through 2030. So we need to position ourselves for the next 8 years to be able to meet the needs and eliminate waiting lists and provide for these critical needs for our area seniors. So we are asking for a 1/2 mil this time for the next 8 years, which means if you have an average home of about $150,000, it's going to cost you about $12.50 more per year. That's it. But we need this 1/2 mil to pass. So August 5th, please vote and vote yes and let other people know. Okay, we appreciate it. Thank you. I think there was a question back there. I'll get you a microphone.
As we're going through these various scenarios, everything that we talked about assumed that there were family members that could deal with some of these problems. What do you do in a situation where there are no family members? You're a neighbor and you observe your next door neighbor with some of these problems, or you have a client that has some of these problems. Who do you go to, and who ultimately is responsible?
Boy. I'm usually not speechless, but that does happen. Then you ask them to identify someone they might be close to that they trust, and try to contact that person. I've seen a lot of people come in my office and they're accompanied by a neighbor or an old neighbor, and I'm thinking, wow, that's really something that you have kind of taken over the care of this person. Oh, well, she's just been so wonderful. I couldn't not help but take care of her. So you'll have to ask the person, is there anybody you want to identify? Because they're going to need a power of attorney. Someone's going to have to step up. Maybe just get them a legal guardian, excuse me, get them a legal guardian and have the courts appoint somebody. And then that person is trusted and they will take over their care. But it's really nice to have somebody that they can identify, that they can trust.
Yeah, the group I mentioned, the professional guardians, sometimes if you can catch things early enough before it goes to court, that is a little bit preferable because the courts will just randomly assign them a guardian. And if you can find someone who does that sort of work without having to go through the court system, that can be nice for the senior to have some input and control over that.
Does that answer your question?
Okay. Yeah.
I think, again, if you're concerned about your neighbor, is to develop that relationship, invite them over for a meal or take something over to their home to see what is actually going on, and to let them know, hey, if there's anything I can do for you, just like you would a neighbor that had cancer, you know, that you would say, hey, you know, these are some things I could do for you, or is there someone I can call? But develop that relationship a little bit more. I think the reality with the baby boomers coming on, we're all going to have to help our neighbors. There's going to be too many people to care for.
There used to be adult protective services, too, that would go out on a situation like that.
Mike, there was somebody.
King County Adult Protective Services, I'm one of 4 staff members in King County, and we get referrals from concerned citizens about situations where they're kind of aware of what's going on, see the symptoms of problems, but they don't have a relationship with that person, but they want to do something to help them. So for Adult Protective Services to accept a referral, there has to be two factors. One is the person has some type of vulnerability. Dementia is certainly a vulnerability. The other is they have to be shown to be at risk of harm, or an allegation that there's some type of risk, exploitation, abuse, or neglect. Self-neglect is one of those.
Thank you very much. We had a question up here and then one over there. So.
In some of the case studies and also at some of the table discussions, it was mentioned that the church is often a good resource to tap into. But do you have any examples of when churches have overfunctioned and instead of been a positive resource have actually caused more difficulty, and to caution those of us in churches that may get involved? Because, yeah, sometimes churches are asked, but the people involved are not capable of helping in a good way.
So in that situation, I think my experience has been more from the perspective of people in my office that feel like, why aren't the churches reaching out to me more? I've been a member here for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and they know I'm hurting, and how come they're not reaching out more? I mean, one of the things that happens when someone has chronic care needs, you know, you get a cancer diagnosis, say, and everybody's there right at that time with, you know, casseroles and phone calls and things like that. But if the care needs continue on for a long period of time, and dementia is one of those problems where the care needs go for a long period of time, sometimes people can have the experience of not feeling supported. I haven't had the experience of people complaining about church members doing too much. I think the one thing I would encourage, if you're here representing a faith community, to really know what the services are in the community and what your limits are, and where you can help direct and help support somebody through this process, because it's a long process. If you're talking about someone with cognitive loss, it's not just 6 weeks that you're going to be, you know, helping support this family in some way. So I don't know if that answers your question or if other people have other thoughts.
Yeah, my experience has been, oh, I'm sorry. My experience has been pretty much what Suzanne has, is that I have not seen a situation where the church took advantage, or people in the church took advantage of someone or overstepped their boundaries or whatever. It's more along the line of at least the faith communities that have reached out to us, is how can we identify those folks that need our services? Because dementia is often a very silent and invisible situation until there's a problem. And so recognizing some of those signs and symptoms and some of the things to look for so that the churches can reach out. But I haven't heard it the other way.
Is that a follow-up? Because she had a question too. No, it's a follow-up. Okay, I'll be right back.
I just wanted to share that I am so pleased with this panel because of your attitude of caring and respect. And I think one of the situations that could arise in a church that wasn't really dealing with healthcare ministries is that professionals in that church might just think that they're helping, but they're really just getting people from system to system. I mean, our healthcare system is very fragmented, and it's not always caring based on the person's needs. So I would just caution you to that. If you have anybody specifically who is a professional and volunteers to help, that they also have this background of caring.
Question over here.
You had suggested that when someone is in need, that they that we offer to get help for them, housekeeping services or whatever. In a situation that I'm aware of, the 85-year-old person has lots of financial resources, but not willing to use them because of a codependency relationship with a daughter and hoping to save those resources for her daughter when she dies. And so how do you address those needs when there is money available, but it can't be released or used?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, but not uncommon. I frequently hear, which I think maybe is specific to the generation that's in their 70s, 80s, and 90s now, that I want to save it for the kids. This is what I want to do for the kids. One of the best things that they can do for the kids is to be proactive about financial plans and organization and documents. So, and I'm not talking about the trip to the attorney's office and having the will updated. I'm talking about their files at home, where to find things, where their accounts are. There are a lot of practical things that they can do to help. What you might want to gently help them realize is there are consequences, financial and otherwise, to not getting help. So they are maybe more open to vulnerabilities. It's astounding to me sometimes to look at a stack of mail that a senior gets, and I don't know if you realize, based on your age, you're on a completely different mailing list, okay, than the general population. Some of this mail is incredibly official looking. They make it look like a FedEx package. They make it look like something from the government, and these are all requests for, donations, but you can't tell that unless you read very, very carefully. So there are a lot of things that could have financial implications that could actually end up providing less for her daughter. So the more knowledgeable she is, which she's going to get that by talking to professionals and getting some assistance. And sometimes, you can meet with someone who charges by the hour for 1 hour and learn a lot about how to set things up for yourself that will be better in the long run.
So one of the things I would suggest is to have a conversation with the elder and say, how much do you want to make sure that your daughter gets? And do you have that available? How much did you get, from your parents? And what would feel like an adequate amount to give? And then depending on that situation, then I might also draw the daughter in to find out, is the daughter expecting this? And is she expecting it and she's kind of ticked because it's not enough because she didn't have a great growing up experience or whatever? Or is she like aghast that mom is behaving this way and what she wants is for mom to have services or whatever they are? So it's kind of complicated because there's all these different pieces. But once you have some of that information, it like Mike was talking about earlier, it will give you a path and a direction to continue to have those conversations. And I would think about it as a series of conversations. It's not going to be just a one-time conversation. You're going to go in, get information, and then mom's going to say, oh, great, Clark at home can come tomorrow. It's not going to go like that. It's going to be a series of conversations. But if you expect that, that's okay,
Okay, we're at our time. It's time for Val to wrap us up today, but perhaps you want to thank the panel here. I think they did a great job. And I believe they're all hanging around afterwards. If you have individual questions, please take advantage of them. So, Val.
And thank you, Mike, as well, for keeping us on track with time. And to each and every one of you for your input and participation this morning. I would ask you to please fill out an evaluation sheet. There's a box right over here just before the door where you can place those. Do put in additional topics that you would find helpful to be addressed in the future. All of today's topics came from evaluation forms that you had submitted previously. So we want to make sure that we continue to offer opportunities for you to learn more and be better at your respective professions by addressing topics that are salient to you.
Yeah. And if this time frame, like a morning for 2 hours was helpful, or if you think, I would have loved to do this for longer than this, or whatever. That would be helpful feedback for us too.
Again, all of our folks will be able to stay behind and talk with you individually if you'd like to take that opportunity. In the meantime, have a wonderful day. Continue to enjoy the summer. And thank you for the way that you're serving the seniors in our community. Grand Rapids is truly blessed to have so many people caring, respecting, and offering the compassion and expertise that you do. So thank you for coming, and we hope to see you again at a future conference.